Samantha Park is the owner and CEO of Sparks, a small New York agency that develops advertising, promotions, and marketing materials for high fashion firms. Park has tended to keep a tight rein on her business, overseeing most projects from start to finish. However, as the firm has grown, she has found necessary to delegate more and more decisions to her associates. She has recently been approached by a higher styling chain that wants a comprehensive redefinition of its entire marketing and promotions look. Should Samantha try to manage this project in her traditional way, or should she delegate major parts to her employees? Most managers confront this question at the same point in their careers. Some experts propose that top executives need to stay very close to the creative core of their business, which means that even if the primary responsibility is to manage, CEO should never cede too much control to committees of creative individuals, or they can lose sight of the firm's overall future direction. Moreover, executives who do fall out of touch with the creative process risk being passed over by a new generation of plugged-in employees who better understand how the business really works. Others offer the opposite advice, saying it's not a good idea for CEO to sweat the small stuff like managing individual client accounts or projects. These experts advise executives to identify everything they can outsource to other employees and to delegate as much as possible. By eliminating trivial tasks, executives will be better able to focus their attention on the most important decision making and control aspect of their jobs, which will help the business and also ensure that the top executive maintains control over the functions that really matter. These pieces of advice are not necessarily in conflict with one another. The real challenge is to identify what you can delegate effectively without ceding too much power and control away from the person with an unifying vision. That is certainly easier said than done, though.
If you were Samantha Parks, how would you prioritize which project or parts of project to delegate? If I were Samantha Parks, I would prioritize which project to delegate by their size of importance. If a project came up that was for a very important customer, I would not delegate many parts of it. I would also check up on the people who do some of the parts. However, if it were a smaller project, then I would delegate most of it but still check in every so often to keep a good oversight of the project. In explaining what makes her decision hard, Park says I hear good people, creative people to run this project, and I worry that they will see my oversight and authority as interfering with their creative process. How can she deal with this concern without giving up too much control? Answering the question of how to keep just the right amount of control over a project is probably one of the hardest to answer. As the case said, if CEOs give up too much power, then a younger wave of people often surpass the current CEO. In order for this to not happen, Park must stay in enough control that she is still direction in which the project are going. I also think it is inevitable for some people to say that any amount of control, no matter how small, interferes with their creative purpose. However, I think she can control without interfering by making deadlines that they must show their work to hereby and then talk with them in a meeting or collaboration style and not just directing them to make the changes. Should executives try to control project to maintain their position of authority? Do they have a right to control project and keep in the loop on important decisions just so they can? Executives should try to minimally control project. I don't think they should do it solely to keep their position of authority thought. They should do it because they want to the project to be successful. In my opinion, I do think that they have a right to be in the loop in order to stay in charge. Usually, people of power got there because they earned it. In Park's case, I would assume she is the CEO because she is very knowledgeable, having expert powers, which is influence based on special skill or knowledge. Robbins, page 307. I think that she should be in charge of the project to make sure people are taking them and keeping them in the right direction. I also think that as a CEO of company, she can't legitimate the power a person receives as a result of her position in the company. Robbins, page 307. Because of that, she has the right to be in control of all of the projects that the company does. What are some tasks in an organization that a top executive should never delegate to others? The first, core function or responsibility. Neither a company nor an individual employee should ever outsource their core competencies, the tasks that add the most value as an employee. If you outsource these tasks, your boss might wonder why he needs to keep you around at all. As a company, you might find yourself held hostage if you outsource and your partner leaves or demand more money. Second, price and discipline. These tasks are two sides of the coin. People will naturally trust and be more loyal to the person who doles out price and incentives, and the higher up you are in a company, the more important it is to do these activities yourself. Likewise, while disciplining employees is possibly a manager's most unpleasant task, it should not be passed off to a subordinate. Don't name some underling to be the one to have to pass out the pink slips. If it must be done, do it yourself. The third, team building and talent nurturing. Perhaps a manager's most important job is building, training, and nurturing his or her team, which is why it's vital not to completely outsource this task. Bringing in the right talent, putting together a team that works well, and understanding which members need training, mentoring, or incentives are the tools for success. 4. Fundraising and investor relations. Especially if you're a CEO or entrepreneur, you can completely delegate these tasks. Investors want to hear from the person in charge whether the news is good or bad. 5. Mission, vision, and company culture. As with team building, you can outsource the core values that bring you together as a team, whether you are the CEO or a team leader. Maintaining the vision that drives your team cannot be forgotten or outsourced. 6. Crisis management. No matter how big the crisis is in the grand scheme of things, your percentage is required. It is important to show all parties that you are monitoring the situation and involved in finding a solution. It doesn't matter whether your organization is negotiation a hostage situation or trying to salvage your biggest account. Which leader will be person and involved. 7. Tradition and etiquette. There are just certain situations that require your presence out of politeness and tradition. It will be unthinkable to send your assistant to the funeral of an employee's relative or team members bidding go or don't go, but don't delegate is one. The most powerful leaders in the world understand the power of delegation, but the best leaders will make a point of keeping this item on their personal to-do list no matter how important or powerful they grow to be.
Hello, my name is Anton Budistiawan. Here I will explain about an example from chapter 14. Well, much of this chapter has discussed methods for achieving harmonious relationship and getting out of conflicts. It's also important to remember there are situations in which too little conflict can be a problem. As we know, in creative problem-solving teams, some level of task conflict early in the process of formulating a solution can be important stimulus to innovation. However, the condition must be right for productive conflict. In particular, individuals must feel psychological safe in bringing up issues for discussion. If people fear that what they say is going to be held against them, they may be reluctant to speak up or rock the boat. Experts suggest that effective conflicts have three key characteristics. They should first speak to what is possible. Second is be compelling. Third is involve uncertainty. So, how should a manager pick a fight? First, ensure that the stakes are sufficient to actually warrant a disruption. Second, focus on the future and on how to resolve the conflict rather than on whom to blame. Third, tie the conflict to fundamental values. Rather than concentrating on winning or losing, encourage both parties to see how successfully exploring and resolving the conflict will lead to optimal outcomes for all. If managed successfully, some degree of open disagreement can be an important way for companies to manage simmering and potentially destructive conflicts. Do this principle work in real organization? The answer is yes. Dropping its old ways of handling, scheduling, and logistics created a great deal of conflict at Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. But applying this principle to managing the conflict helped the railroad adopt a more sophisticated system and recover its competitive position in the transportation industry. Doug Conan, CAO of Campbell Soup, increased functional conflicts in his organization by emphasizing a higher purpose of the organization efforts rather than focusing on whose side was winning a conflict. Thus, a dysfunctional conflict environment changed dramatically, and the organization was able to move from one of the worst performing food companies to one that was recognized as a top performer by both the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and Fortune 500 data on employee morale. So, from the problem of in this case, there are several questions related to chapter 14. The first one is, how do we ensure adequate discussion of the issue in the working group, and how can managers express unspoken conflicts without exacerbating them? That is the first question. And then the second is, how can negotiators utilize conflict management strategy to their advantage so that the different interests do not lead to dysfunctional conflict but to positive integrative solution? Last, the third is, when we are in a situation of on our life, can silence exacerbate conflict between ourselves and the other? What might have been done differently to ensure that open communication facilitates collaboration? That is an example of case we took for chapter 14, which will be explained by my partner Arthur Murtesia Mutahari after.
Okay, I will answer the chapter 14 question. From our discussion, that to ensure the insurance to discussion of continuing an issue in work group, there are a number of things that individual can do. But the most important things that a manager or any leader can do is to embrace conflict. Mike Miat, as a contributor of Forbes.com, wrote an article called 5 Key of Dealing with Workplace Conflict. Miat wrote that the ability to recognize conflict, understand the nature of the conflict, and to be able to bring swift and just resolution to conflict will serve you well as a leader. Inability to do so may well be your downfall. One of the main things that Miat mentioned multiple times in this article in that conflict shouldn't always be viewed negatively. The entire group need to understand that in every conflict there is potential for teaching and learning opportunities. This agreement can also contribute to growth and development. And our organization is going to welcome conflict. They should clearly define what constitutes as acceptable behavior in working space. Miat said that creating a framework from discussion making, use a published delegation authority statement, encouraging sound business practice in collaboration, team building, leadership development, and talent management will help avoid conflict. This method can help group avoid conflict, but they can also allow group to deal with the conflict more professionally when they arise. If manager want to bring unspoken conflict into the open without making them worse, the very thing that manager has to do is recognize there is a disagreement. Our textbook state that successful conflict management recognize this different approach and attempt to resolve them by encourage frank discussion, focus on interest rather than issue. And then the answer for number 2 is, according from our opinion, there are few ways that a negotiation can utilize conflict management strategy to their advantage. One of the major things that they can do is encourage open and frank discussion focused on interest rather than issue. This is also addressed in distributive and integrative bargaining style. Along with this method, Exhibit 14.4 is intended with list of number conflict resolution technique can be useful in negotiation in order to get positive integrative solution. Some of the techniques that can be useful are problem solving, subordinate goals, smoothing, compromise, and authoritative command. The problem solving is important because it helps identify the problem in face-to-face meeting. Problem solving is also allow open discussion. Superordinate goals create a shared goals among the parties that cannot be attained with the cooperative of all the parties. Superordinate goals can be useful in bargaining and problem solving stage. Smoothing play down is different while emphasizing common interest between and conflict and parties. Compromise can be also used in bargaining and problem solving stage. Compromising require each party to give up something of value of them. Lastly, authoritative command is defined as management use its formal authority to resolve the conflict and then communicates its desire to the parties involved. In the case of negotiation, an authoritative command will be arbitrator, which is a third party negotiation who has authority to get an agreement. All of the conflict resolving technique we mentioned that above can be used in order to reach positive integrative solution because they all work to downplay difference and allow open discussion. And the answer for 3 is in some group that another class that have a member keep it silent when a deal a conflict, but that silence doesn't make a conflict disappear. Oftentimes it's escalate if it isn't deal with a proactive, and that's exactly what happened. And then for another example, which silent words is conflict that plays during my friend's job. He worked in construction during a summer month, which require a large group of people to live together extended period, anywhere from 7 to 21 days. Most conflict in the workplace go to unresolved. And I'm watch work relations scramble because in the past of the summer, there are many employees that have ended up quitting because unresolved conflict. With my first example, clear communication would have been useful to ensure open discussion on the issue. It would have been wise for the other team member to address the conflict head on instead of avoiding it. For the second example, the company did make effort to resolving that issue. He sat in 3 until 4 hours meeting where the boss discussed the issue with the employee. They allowed their employee to voice their opinion and they were able to agree on possible solution.